Hello, everyone. Welcome to Measuring the Score podcast, the podcast where we offer our opinions on film scores and the films they're inspired by. I'm Chris.
And I'm Leslie.
Let's get started. Hey everyone, this is episode 7, and today we're going to be talking about Beverly Hills Cop. But before we do, we're going to talk about what we've been listening to. Before we get to what you've been listening to, Leslie, I want to talk about what I've been listening to because
I see what you did there.
there's a
Selfish.
reason. There is a reason. I've been listening to Lego Universe by Brian Tyler. It's a game that came out years ago, and I remember watching a video on his website about this, and because it was a remote session with the orchestra, and the conductor at the time, he was talking about how he didn't really have to change any of the music or anything like that because the music was it worked so well. And they just now released it on digital earlier this week, and it was great because it starts off with Patrick Stewart talking, and the themes and the music does not sound like Brian Tyler, because Brian Tyler is more known for his action, like Fast and Furious.
Guitar.
Yeah, a lot of guitar work and stuff like that. Not, fantasy, kid-like elements in a score.
Whimsical.
Yeah, that's another word that we could use. Maybe that's the
Whimsy.
word. Maybe that was the word I was looking for. I'm not too sure, but
Danny Elfman.
No, it's not really Danny Elfman the way it plays out. It's just more whimsical, and it has its own style and theme, and the theme that he created for the game plays throughout the score, and it comes in at the right moments just from listening to it. But there was one track in particular. I can't remember the name of it now. It's something with a crocodile. It was so fun. I was sitting there kind of like bobbing my head in the car as I was heading to work and listening to it. Now let's get to what you've been listening to.
Well, it's not really a score that I've been listening to. So I felt compelled to listen to this piece of music because you were doing Beverly Hills Cop. So the album that I was listening to, Chris, you can tell everybody.
It was H. John Benjamin. He does the voice of Bob on Bob's Burgers. And Jazz Daredevil came up with a album called the Soundtrack Collection.
So this album, the Soundtrack Collection, has a selected group of soundtracks on it that
soundtrack themes.
The themes, rather, not the whole scores or the whole soundtracks, but the themes. And they're very notable themes. Well, Axel F is one of the themes on there. Well, it's a comedy, so it's not played quite correctly. There are some misnotes. There's some notes that are crashed into the other notes. Timing is off. Keys have changed. But it's absolutely funny if you know the themes that are on the album.
So whereas Beverly Hills Cop goes do 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 do, his version goes do 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 do. Not kidding. First time I heard this, I laughed so hard, I started crying. I was not expecting this. I seen it popped up as like a sponsored ad on Instagram, and I was like, okay, what is this? It's John Benjamin from Bob's Burgers, and he come up with an album, which is not entirely unheard of because Matt Berry from the IT Crowd has an album, and he sounds fantastic, and it's not a comedy. It's a very serious. So that's what I was thinking. I was like, okay, maybe it's just he made an album. No.
So, it was after we watched the movie, after we listened to the score, Chris and I were coming home, and so Chris had to stop and get something from the gas station, and it was dark, so I didn't want him to go in there by himself, at night. and he was following me home. So I pulled into the gas station, and Chris peeked in the car, and he wanted to know if I needed anything when he went in there. And he's like, "What are you listening to?" I says, "You really want to know?" He says, "Yeah, I want to listen too." So then I put the Axel F theme on, and Chris is like, "Oh, I totally forgot about that."
Yeah, that's when I said, "Oh yeah, we got to mention that on the podcast."
Yeah, he then said that we needed to mention it. So that's what I've been listening to. It's not really a score, but it's soundtrack inspired.
So if you guys have not listened to this already, go on Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to music from. I think it's on YouTube as well. Look up John Benjamin and Jazz Daredevil, the soundtrack collection. This is not an ad or nothing like that. Seriously, go find
He
it.
covers Love Story. He covers
Chariots
Axel
of Fire.
F. Chariots of Fire is on there. Halloween, which is horrible.
But it opens up with
Top
Kenny,
Gun.
Kenny Loggins' Danger Zone, and Kenny Loggins. I don't know if it really is Kenny Loggins, but it might be. Kenny Loggins is listening, and he cuts in, and he's like, John, no, this is terrible. We can't go with this." I don't want to spoil it, but seriously, guys, go find this and listen to it. It was wonderful. I laughed so hard. I still think it's funny.
Yeah, we laughed so hard we actually cried on this one. So it's pretty amazing.
But that's not what we're going to be covering today. Today we're covering Beverly Hills Cop by Harold Faltermeyer.
The very first one.
The actual score to the very first film. Now, if you haven't seen Beverly Hills Cop, it's the story of a Detroit detective who one of his friends visits him out of the blue. The friend gets killed. Eddie Murphy goes to Beverly Hills to track down the killer who murdered his friend, and then gets tied up all this, and gets the Beverly Hills Police Department involved, and shootouts occur, laughs and jokes. It's a wonderful movie.
It's a comedy. It's not an action. It's not like a typical cop action movie, serious. It's got very comedic elements to it because it's Eddie Murphy. And you got to keep in mind that the majority of the movie, when Eddie Murphy's concerned, was ad-libbed.
I did not know that.
Yes, so it wasn't scripted. A lot of it, for his part, was not scripted.
I mean, that makes sense, though. I mean, because the opening, we'll talk about that in the movie section. But yeah, okay.
Yeah, so it was ad-libbed. The movie was an immediate blockbuster and was the highest grossing film released in 1984, and it made $234 million.
That is a lot of money back then.
It's a lot of money now.
Well, I mean, it's a lot of money now, but I mean, especially for back then.
Yeah.
I mean, that, and it was produced by Don Simpson and Jerry Bruckheimer. Unfortunately, Don Simpson passed away. Jerry Bruckheimer's name, the Pirates of the Caribbean, Bad Boys, National Treasure, huge name films and he's still producing to this day. I mean, especially the CSI TV series. I mean, that's huge right then and there. And this in 1984, coming out strong like this, that's something else.
So the movie took a few years to make. There was a few big named actors they were going to consider for the role of Axel Foley, and one of them was Mickey Rourke. He was considered for the role. I could
not see Whiplash in this role at all.
Yeah. Well, at the time he was really popular and they wanted to put him in the film. And then this is what amazed me. Sylvester Stallone was considered for the role. So Sylvester Stallone took it upon himself to rewrite the script.
Well, I mean, he is a good writer.
To make it more fitting for the films that he was in, because, he filmed Rocky prior to this, and he filmed Rambo prior to this.
All right, so let me take a stab. Less humor, more action.
Absolutely. You got it right. Ding, 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 ding.
Ding, ding, ding,
So
ding.
he took the original script and he made it more action-packed.
I can see that.
Less humorous, more gun violence. And he claims, now this is a rumor, but he claims that there was a falling out because they could not come to a decision on what type of orange juice to keep in his trailer. I've read that.
I could see that.
So after he got kicked off the film, he went ahead and used the majority of that script he used for Beverly Hills Cop for Cobra.
Which a lot of people like Cobra. I'm not a big fan of
My
Cobra.
brother loves that movie.
I'm not a big fan of my brother liked Cobra. I don't know. I'm not a big Cobra fan. I'm sorry.
I'm not either. I think it's lacking.
Yeah.
But so Cobra, when you watch Cobra, a lot of the elements in Cobra was supposed to be for Beverly Hills Cop.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Faltermeyer, his theme song for this movie reached number 1 in 1985 on the charts. And Faltermeyer was a classically trained German composer. And he got his start with assisting Giorgio Moroder. I cannot pronounce his name because anytime I see it, I think of Mordor.
I was thinking the same thing
Yes.
every time I saw that
With
name.
Midnight Express.
So we're going to say Mordor. No, unfortunately, we are going to get names wrong on this podcast.
We're Southern and we apologize. Our English sometimes is not the best.
Yeah. So if anybody's listening to this and they're going, oh my God, they wrote that name wrong. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I speak German and Southern. That's it. That's all I speak. So his last name is spelled, for y'all that want to know, Moroder. Marauder. Can't say it. Anyway, he assisted him with Midnight Express prior to working on this film.
Okay.
Yes. And so then Faltermeyer, after this film came out, went on to do Fletch and Top Gun.
After this film?
After this film.
Okay. Yeah. And then not only that, because after listening to the score for Beverly Hills Cop, I was at work, and I usually watch, either TV or a movie at work during my lunch. So I decided to watch Tango and Cash, and I'm sitting there, and the film starts up and everything, and this is one of those rare instances where the film starts up with no opening credits at all. So I had no idea who was directing, who was scoring, whatever. The movie starts up, starts playing, and I start hearing this synthesized music start up, and I'm like, okay, that sounds pretty good. All of a sudden, the theme comes in. I'm like, this sounds like Harold Faltermeyer, because I just listened to the score for Beverly Hills Cop. I'm like, no, this can't be Harold Faltermeyer. He didn't do Tango and Cash. No. And all of a sudden, it kept going. I'm like, this sounds just like Faltermeyer. Sure enough, it was Harold Faltermeyer.
He's got his own style.
Well, it's like I couldn't get away from him. And you're talking about the Stallone taking the humor out of Beverly Hills Cop. Tango and Cash is full of humor. I mean, that's all it is Kurt Russell and Stallone just going back and forth, riffing on each other.
I hadn't seen that movie in a very long time.
It's still funny, and it's still great. I mean, and so for Stallone to take the, humor out of Beverly Hills Cop, maybe he realized, maybe I should have kept the humor in.
Did that movie come out around the same time the Turner Hooch came out?
I think so.
Yeah, because I get those two confused.
I would too.
I think it was you said Tango and Cash.
Right.
Yeah, I could see Cash as being the Hooch and Turner Hooch. And
I'm sure Kurt Russell really appreciates that right now.
I know, but it's it blurs together. The 80s blur together. For
Yeah,
me.
they do. Well, this is like late 80s, early 90s.
Still blurs together.
Yeah, I know.
The older you get, the more blurry it gets.
So one of the things about the score, it's very 80s pop synthesized score. There's no orchestra in here. As far as I know, there's no live instruments in the score itself.
Now, Faltermeyer won a Grammy for his work on Beverly Hills Cop. So he won a Grammy for the score that we're about to discuss.
And you can tell it. Yeah, there's a lot of moments where you can really tell, especially for the Beverly Hills Cop theme, which he refers to as the banana theme. And the reason for that is there's a scene which Eddie Murphy is sticking a banana in the tailpipe of Judge Reinhold and Taggart. I cannot remember the actor's name. I think it's John Ashton.
You fail.
I think it's John Ashton. I can't use my phone.
But I can't tell you fail because I don't remember his name either.
I just remember the character, Taggart. But he puts the banana in the tailpipe. So the theme was originally written for that one scene, and I guess they liked it so much, they're like, hey, why don't we just make this a theme for Beverly Hills Cop? So that's what happened.
Yeah, but that scene was originally written for potatoes.
So it would have been the potato theme.
Yeah. So what happened was they could not get the potatoes, and one of the shots that, or a few of the scenes that they were shooting, was at the lobby of this hotel, and the lobby was still open. So they went ahead and shot in the lobby,
Yeah.
which had bananas.
And featured a very young Damon Wayans.
Oh, he's still funny.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So the theme itself was made by 3 different synthesizers.
A Roland Jupiter 8, a Roland JX3P, and a Yamaha DX7.
A what?
Yamaha DX7.
Yamaha?
Yamaha, whatever.
Okay.
Again, like we were just talking about, we're Southern.
I want to play one of those Yamaha pianos.
Shut it. So JP8, or Jupiter 8, has 61 keys and is a polyphonic analog subtractive synthesizer. Now, a polyphonic property is a property of music instruments, which means they can play more than one melody at a time. So basically, it plays it out and you can add to it. Now, this was 1982, 83, 84, very early 80s. So to be able to have synthesizers that can do something like this, that was amazing at the time.
Well, it was also an expensive synthesizer.
Right.
Synthesizer. Yeah,
And
try
you're
to say
gonna
that.
Yeah, making fun of me.
Let's
huh?
try
That's-
to tongue tie that.
That's what you get. So, and the Roland JX3P was the first one to incorporate MIDI, M-I-D-I. That is a huge accomplishment because MIDI is still used to this day.
Yeah, I know you use MIDI.
Yeah, I use a lot of MIDI files.
So explain what MIDI files do.
MIDI files are basically, you can record the notes straight up and export each individual note out. I do not know the actual term for MIDI and everything else, but I mean, I download MIDI files and it has the entire score laid out in one project file.
So you mean each note or each
instrument? Each instrument. I'm sorry, each instrument.
Oh, okay. So if I had a composition, for example, that had like a flute and let's say a tuba and a French horn.
It will separate it by instrument.
So I could separate the French horn line out of there.
Right. And that's what I've used. So like I was trying to play Star Wars and I didn't have the note. I couldn't find just the sheet music for it. So I downloaded a MIDI file and it had each instrument separated for me. And it was all laid out to where I could play just the brass, just the strings.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So that's what a MIDI file is.
Okay.
And so for the JX3P to be the first one to incorporate MIDI, that is huge.
Well, the Yamaha DX7, from what I read, was one of the highest selling keyboards at the time, and they sold over 200,000 units between 83 and 89. That was the range, I think, that they used, that particular Yamaha. So it was a top seller.
And see, that's crazy because now I have the Yamaha DX7 software on my computer. The entire DX7 is right there virtually on my computer. I thought that was amazing. So right when you said that, the DX7,
yeah, that was a big honking piece of technology, and what's sitting on your desk is like really itty bitty tiny.
I got a 25 key.
That's right. It's
keyboard.
not 61 keys.
No.
It's 25.
That hooks up USB.
It's little bitty.
And for him to have all 3 of these synthesizers just for the score, that is amazing. That he was able to create an entire score for a feature film using just 3 synthesizers. That's awesome. That is a huge accomplishment.
That's better than what I could do. I could put 2 notes together and they sound like the most horrid thing ever.
One of the things listening to the score itself, there was not a huge amount of variety.
Yeah, I noticed that. Of course, the first thing that I picked up on was the fact that it was synth, which is fine. That was really big in the 80s.
And it's not like it was bad sounding synthesizer either. It had a great sound to it. There was, it was very catchy, very upbeat, and very fun to listen to.
But like the synth, the Yamaha synth, synthesizer that he utilized. They also utilized it in rock ballads. They utilized it in some pop songs. Aha used it. There's a few other bands that used it at the time. So, I mean, it was quite popular to synthesize music. That was the sound that they were looking for at the time. So, listening to the score, that stuck out. So, the first thing that I thought of was, okay, this was popular culture. He wrote the music to the times to put into this, upbeat, hip, quote unquote film, which is what it was supposed to be.
Yeah, and it works, and you can tell, and it like I said, it had a great sound to it. It was very enjoyable to listen to. But the problem I was noticing just listening to it was you hear the very, very iconic Beverly Hills Cop theme, and then there's I call it the searching theme comes in, and then it goes back to the Beverly Hills Cop theme, then it goes back to the searching theme, and then it goes back to something new will come in there every so often. But once that something new comes in, he sticks with it for so long, then all of a sudden back to the Beverly Hills Cop theme, then goes back to, I think there's something called the shootout theme. And listening to it, toward the end of it, I got a little bored with it.
And I'm used to listening to classical music. I'm used to listening to John Williams, for example, his scores that aren't synth-based,
Right.
Scores that actually have an orchestra backing, or even scores that might have a touch of guitar or synthesizer to it. But the majority of the score is instrumental based. And listening to this score, as a musician, it made it difficult for me, and I don't know if it was because it was the synthesized part, but it made it difficult for me to sometimes pull out the melody, or it made it difficult for me to pull out the counter melody. It's like my brain just was like, what? What am I listening to? And, I'm pretty good for the most part of picking out those elements in a piece, or picking out, the meaning of the piece. And it was kind of hard for me when I listened to the score to do that.
Right. But was it still enjoyable for you? Did you?
Well, yeah. I mean, it reminded me of my youth. It reminded me of listening to some of those old pop songs that were popular at the time. And of course, Axel F theme. I grew up listening to that.
Right.
So, it was nostalgic for me to go back and listen to the score. And so it was enjoyable in that aspect. But as far as, the musicianship behind it, it was difficult for me to pick out those elements. And
Right.
I think it was because it was synthesized, and it's because I'm not accustomed to listening to music like that.
Well, see, it being synthesized didn't bother me because, I mean, I even created an album that is entirely synthesized. I get asked a lot of the time to create the synthesized score. So that part didn't bother me too much. Well, the score itself didn't really bother me. It was just, I think there should have been a little bit more change up, a little bit more variety. But going back and listening to and thinking about, okay, well, this is what was for a big, budget blockbuster action comedy. This is what made it. This is what they liked back then. It's kind of amazing, especially when it was created with just 3 synthesizers. I thought, thinking back on that, I thought that's kind of cool, I guess.
It's cool. And, as I stated, I had difficulty with picking out themes and melodies and counter melodies. I had difficulty doing that. But the other thing I had difficulty doing is trying to figure out what the piece was for.
Right.
Because, in a structured score, you can pick out sometimes what the piece is for. I remember when we sat down one time and listened to, it was the Spider-Man movie that had, that Hans Zimmer did.
Oh, Amazing Spider-Man 2.
The Amazing Spider-Man, the second one. And it had, what's the electric guy's name?
Oh, Electro.
Electro. It had Electro in it. And so we sit down and we listen to the score. And as soon as Electro's theme came on,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember telling you this, I was able to describe to a T his life. Okay, this is what's going on here.
Right.
This is what's going on here, by the music and through the music.
Right.
And granted, his score wasn't 100% instrumental, but I could do that in that score. And I can do that in most scores. But this one here, I had kind of a difficult time trying to visualize what the piece was for.
Because it's mainly the same thing over and over and over. Every time. And that's what we mean by variety. It was just, like I said, he gets this one theme and he just sticks with it for a little bit, and all of a sudden, Beverly Hills Cop theme comes in. Then Axel F, sorry, and then all of a sudden, same thing. Axel F comes in, same thing. Axel F comes in, and it was one of those things. Listening to it, it was kind of hard to understand what was going on just by listening to it. Now, when we started watching the film, the first thing that happens is a song plays. It's not a score, but it's a song.
The heat is on.
The heat is on. Do, 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 do. Yep, just totally embarrassed myself. And it was a very catchy song. Did not know it was written for the film by Faltermeyer. But it was written by Keith Forsey and Harold Faltermeyer, and it was performed by Glenn Frey. I didn't know it was written by him.
I didn't either until we started doing research for this film. And, granted, I used to sing that song all the time as a kid,
We
dance
still
around
do.
the house. We still sing it sometimes. But it was nice to know that he took part in writing it.
Yeah, no, and that's great. And that wasn't the only song that he did. There was a song called "Stir It Up," and it was produced by Faltermeyer and performed by Patti LaBelle.
So then the second piece started to play, still no score, and it was the Neutron Dance.
Yeah, still no score.
And it was the first action sequence of the movie.
A big 18-wheeler driving through
that has
Detroit.
Eddie Murphy in the back of it, swinging.
With the cigarettes flying everywhere and it crashing into cars.
But still no score.
Still no score. The only time we get score is probably like 15, 20 minutes
now,
into
we're
the
exaggerating. It might not even be 15 minutes, but it felt like that.
And it's for Axel is driving up, pulling into his apartment.
With his crappy car that he's driving.
Crappy Chevy blue Chevy Nova.
Blue Chevy Nova.
That's
so that's the first hint of the song, the score that we get.
And it's
but
the
it's
theme.
The theme. So they put the theme that early in the music, or in the movie rather. So we're like, okay, I wrote it down on my notes. Okay, we listen to the theme. Well,
and then the bad guys show up. They kill his friend, and I do not remember any score for that scene, which I may be wrong, but I don't remember hearing a score for that. And it was a very dramatic scene, but if there was score, it wasn't wasn't known. Our little mascot just made a groaning noise. He probably doesn't agree.
Yes, we have a little Yorkie. He's our mascot. He's with us every time we record. So
he's always in Leslie's arms.
Say hi to Mr. Thomas.
So, but yeah, and that was such a dramatic scene that I don't remember a score. And like I said, Eddie Murphy's, Axel's friend just got killed. Still no score.
Still no music. And then the fourth time we actually hear music in the movie, it's part of the soundtrack.
It's Stir It Up by, Patti LaBelle.
No score.
Yeah.
So we have this periods of time where we have this score piece and then soundtrack, score piece and soundtrack. And it's really it feels odd because it's timed oddly, that there's a lack of score in places that, in my mind, should have had score.
Right. And I don't know. I mean, can you call those songs part of the score? Maybe that's what Faltermeyer was trying to do.
Looking back, it seems like what he has done was mixed score with soundtrack. So it's not like it's a separate entity. So, for example, when you watch these movies nowadays that have music in the background, you'll hear the score piece, but they would put what they call a soundtrack in it. And the soundtrack is actually the music, as in singing, pop tunes or whatnot.
For the film Resident Evil, I watched it with the commentary on, and Paul Anderson was talking about that type of music. It's normally called source music. And I remember because he was saying for that film, they had Marilyn Manson doing the score with Marco Beltrami, so they called it scorce music. So I never knew that for the longest time until, I watched that commentary. So to have a lot of source music in with this film, maybe that's what they were doing back then.
It seems like they've mixed it up because he won an award for this. And I highly doubt that it was just because he wrote Axel F. Even though that was a great piece, it seems like it was a combination of that and the pieces that he helped write to contribute to the movie, in my mind.
Right, and maybe that's what it was. Maybe the source music was just part of the score in his mind. I mean, because Axel F became so popular, there was even a music video with Harold Faltermeyer dancing around in a trench coat, on like a green screen, and Beverly Hills Cop was playing behind him. The first time I saw that, I was like, a composer sitting there playing the theme, which Harold Faltermeyer performed every bit of the score.
Yes, he did. He's classically trained.
And to see that music video was something else. So if you've never seen this, look that up. Harold Faltermeyer, Axel F music video, and it's out there, trust me.
So then the other thing that I noticed as the movie progressed, that every time that they would put a score piece in there, it would be Axel F. Repeated over and over and over again. So, then of course my smart alecky self was like, oh, I see why this became so popular. Because you hear it so much, then it gets stuck in your mind.
Yeah, and it is true, because it does. I mean, after this film, I'm just walking into work, and do. Oh, stop it. But it works.
For all the scenes in the movie, it seems like they put Axel F in there.
Yeah. There was only very little variety with the theme too. Like sometimes you change up like the pitch or something like that. There was only one instance I remember where there was something different with the theme, and it was when it wasn't Judge Reinhold and Taggart. It wasn't Billy and Taggart. It was the other two cops following him, and he blew through a red light, and you hear slight variation. There's like a higher note and a lower note playing. All of a sudden, then the Axel F comes back.
So, the thing that I was looking for was to see if he utilized all the pieces we listened to on the score in the movie. And there was only one instance besides the Axel F theme that I heard of he utilized the piece outside of the score. It seemed like the rest of the pieces, I don't know if they were hidden within the movie or I just wasn't paying attention, but I didn't hear them. I heard one that was put in there, but not all of them. So all the pieces that were in the score themselves, I felt like I didn't hear in the movie.
Yeah, there was a lot of moments like that in there. So maybe it wasn't fully his idea. Maybe it was a combination of the director, producers, whatever, studio. Maybe that's what it was. Maybe there was supposed to be more score and they decided against it. I mean, that is a possibility that it does happen, but I don't know. The movie was fantastic, and the score for what was there, I mean, it sounded great in the film, and it worked with the humor and everything else, and it worked with Eddie Murphy's character. There should have just been more. There should have been more variety. It should have been something different.
So let's talk about Axel F theme in the movie. I felt like the theme for the Axel F theme, rather, did its job. It
does.
It's got a comedic element to it. So listening to it where they placed it in the funny parts of the movie kind of seemed to make the scene a little bit more funnier.
It did. And especially like the scene that it was originally written for, the banana and the tailpipe scene. I mean, it
fit. Well,
yeah, because the waiter looks over at Eddie Murphy's character, gives him a wink, and Axel gives him a wink, or no, Axel gives him a wink, the waiter gives him a wink, and then it continues to put the banana. It fit with the humor, and it fits Axel Foley. It fits that character. I mean, it just works because it starts off with the bass line, and then it slowly kicks in with the percussion, then it comes in with the main melody and everything else of the higher synth It
Now,
works.
it worked also with the action pieces. So, of course, it's a cop movie. So, you have action, you have some gunfire, you've got shootouts, and it worked for those scenes too.
Yeah, it did.
I mean, it didn't take away from the scenes. It didn't clash what was going on. It worked fine with those scenes.
Now, there was another score piece. It was, I believe he called it the shootout theme, which was played like over and over and over on repeat during the entire ending of the film. That, to me, did not work. It was way too upbeat. It was just, I don't know. There should have been something different there for that. I mean, because it's an almost a very dark moment for the film, except for Billy and Taggart trying to climb over the wall, which was
Yeah, that was kind of funny.
It was still funny, but I mean, it's the climactic moment of the film. The hero is chasing down the villain, which the actor playing Victor Maitland was a very scary looking person. His eyes just kind of freaked me out a little bit.
His hitman's eyes freaked me out.
Yeah. And but Foley's chasing down the bad guy there, and it was a dark moment, but you've got this very upbeat pop sounding score that's playing on repeat, and I was just like, that to me did not work at all. So, maybe it was the time, maybe it was because it was 1984 and I'm so used to something different now. Going back on it now, I could not get into it.
So, as you said, you felt like it didn't work for the film. I was perplexed throughout the whole film with how did this score win awards?
Win a Grammy.
It won a Grammy. How did it win a Grammy? Because I felt like that even though it worked for parts of the film, I felt like I wanted more. I wanted more score in there. I wanted some of those serious scenes to have something playing in the background.
Right.
Granted, you can have too much score in a movie and it takes away from the scene. There's a balance. You need to maintain that balance. But I felt like the pieces that the scenes of the movie that I would like to have had score, there was none there.
Right. No, look, I mean, we're not saying that we hate the score. That's not what we're saying. It's more we're not understanding so much
the placement and the variety, lack of variety.
I mean, because that is one of the main things with the score. And after I listened to the score for this film, I went back and started listening to the score for the second film, and immediately there's more variety. Right off the bat, the very first score piece, it's Captain Bogomil is jogging through the oil field and everything else. And
Captain Gargamel?
Yeah, Gargamel. Gargamel?
I'm sorry.
Bogomil, and he's a character in the first film. He's jogging, he notices some stuff and everything else from what I remember. I can't remember seeing the film in like years. But there's a theme that starts up and it starts playing. There's something else that happens in the score. It steadily changes up, but it sounds great. It sounds poppy. It sounds, there's a beat to it. There's going, all of a sudden it just keeps going. All of a sudden there's another change. Then I kept listening to the rest of the score to see, and then I know he did bring the shootout theme back, but he changed it up. There's a lot of variety in there. The Axel F themes comes in there, and of course there's more variety. I don't know. Maybe it was just because this was his third film.
Perhaps it could be, the director. Remember, earlier when I talked about that it took a while for them to write the script to the movie that they were happy with. But on the flip side, they were still changing lines as the movie was being filmed.
Right.
So there is a scene where the chief looked like he had rolled up papers in his hand, and it was actually the script because they changed lines that morning before he went in. So they left it in there because it made him look official. But on the flip side, no, that was his script.
And after you told me about that, I remember in my head, because right when you told me that, I started playing that scene in my head, started trying to figure out. And sure enough, if you go back and watch, you can tell us the script if you look at it. And I thought that was funny. Yeah,
and so it could have been because of how the dialogue was uncertain, the uncertainty there, or it could be that the fact that it changed so much. But to me, it was just a little bit confusing
Right.
as to why.
Well, and there was not like a whole lot of history that we could find about the score itself or about how Faltermeyer got the job or whatever else. All we can ever find about is Faltermeyer's thoughts on Axel F. That was it. Or Top Gun.
Well, that's because, Axel F., that was all that was playing in the movie.
I remember we were watching it, and I got up to go get some snacks or something, and I said, I'll be right back, just leave the movie playing. I went and got him, come back, and I said, oh, how many times did I miss Axel F?
I said, you're missing it right now.
And sure enough, it was playing right when I walked back into the bedroom. I mean, I like the theme, and it's not like I ever got tired of hearing it when it came in. It was just like, oh, there it is again. Oh, there it is again. Oh,
yeah,
there
you should see in my notes how many times theme started Axel F. Theme started Axel F. Theme started Axel. No score.
Axel
song Axel F.
Like I said, it was a very enjoyable score, and it works. I mean, it was great. It was a great sounding score, but I don't know. And it wasn't like it was uncommon in the 80s to have a film with a lot of soundtrack in there, or, to have a film start off like 15, 20 minutes into it and there's no score. Because look at Back to the Future. When it started up, there was no score for at least 15 to 20 minutes. Same with Beverly Hills Cop.
Yeah, and that
maybe it was a time period.
It could have been the time period.
I do remember a lot of films in the 80s had a lot of source music in there instead of score.
And that was a thing that kind of changed from, back in the day in the old movies.
Right. Because now you have to deal with a lot of licensing issues and everything else, so they tend to just have a lot of score than their source music.
Yeah, and maybe one day we'll talk about the evolution of music in movies.
Yeah, that'll work. So as always on Measuring the Score, we break it down to 3 different criteria. Does it work for the film?
Yes and no. The theme works wonderful. It added to the scenes that were comedic. It added to the scenes, in my opinion, that were action, packed. No, in the fact that it was too repetitive. There was not enough variety, in my opinion. I felt like we needed more variety in what they were playing, and it wasn't enough. There were scenes that I felt like needed a score or needed something playing, and there was nothing.
Right, and I agree. I completely agree. There was, it worked for the most part, but I think if there was something else in there for different scenes, I think it would have worked even better than what was there.
Yeah, and as you were saying, the second one, is more variety, more action-packed, and in my opinion, the second movie, I like a little bit better than the first movie. It's one of my favorites. So
I actually remember it more than I do the first film.
Yeah, so do I. But I haven't seen it in forever. But I do remember the score being good.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, your favorite scene or score for the film?
My favorite score for the film.
Yeah, what was your favorite score piece? Axel F1 or 18?
Axel F part 25.
So what was your favorite scene?
My favorite scene with the score, and it would have to be the banana scene in which the score was written. I liked that scene. It was funny. Seeing him sneaking around, he got the upper hand with his police partners,
right.
His Beverly Hills police partners.
Billy Rosewood and Taggart. Now, that was my favorite scene with the score, but it's not one of my favorite scenes. I think one of my favorite scenes is when Foley goes and visits Maitland, the bad guy, at the country club, and he's talking with the guy at the front, and he's like, maybe I should go give him this message myself. But, he plays a very humorous scene. And then when he meets the guy, he's almost kind of scary the way he's talking to this. He's very cool, calm, collected, but it's almost an eeriness to him because he's like, hi, Vic. And it's like, it's almost Star Trek with Eric Bana, where he's like, hi, Christopher, I'm Nero. This nonchalant, slightly evil, like, he's fixing to mess you up.
But see, that it shows the range of the actor there.
Right.
Yeah, and he had such a He's a great actor.
He is,
Bottom
and
line,
he still
great
is.
actor.
And, he's being handcuffed, and he's just staring this guy down like, you killed my friend. I'm going to take you down for it.
Yeah, there's a serious side to a lot of Eddie Murphy's acting. And so, we saw just a piece of that there. Yeah, he's a comedian, but I've seen him in some serious parts or pieces, movies rather, and he's done an amazing job in those as well. He is really a versatile actor. He's really wonderful.
So what could have been done better? I think we've already discussed this. More variety.
More variety, and I think more placement throughout the movie.
Right.
I would have liked to have heard it in several different places. One of the scenes that I felt like it was needed, you've already mentioned, was when his friend died.
Right.
He could have had some sad music playing.
Maybe
or
not
something.
even sad music. He could have had like a low bass note, a low drone,
something. Or the scene where he meets his friend, where he goes into his apartment and his friend's sitting there, in front of the refrigerator.
Instead of just the Axel F theme playing, have something else.
Put something else there. So that's what I would have liked to have happened with this movie.
Same here. I've been saying it from the beginning. There should have been more variety, and there should have been. I mean, if I was scoring this film, I would have tried to change it up every so often. I could have. There's been a lot of times where the director's like, "Let's bring the theme back in there," and I'm like, "No, let's not. Let's just hold off. Bring the theme in only when it's needed. That way when you get it, it's almost like a bonus. Like, oh, it came back. That way it's not drilled into your head.
Aha!
Yeah, exactly.
I heard you.
Yeah, and exactly. I mean, because there's a lot of moments where I've scored and the director is like that. Let's bring this back. Let's bring this back. No, let's hold off a little bit because you do not want the audience to get to the point where they hear it so much they get tired of it. And unfortunately, I think that's maybe what happened here. Now, granted, it won a Grammy, but still.
We heard it so much, it got stuck in our memory banks.
Exactly.
I was even singing it today.
Which one? The John Benjamin version or Faltermeyer?
Really, Faltermeyer's version until I re-listened to John Benjamin's version also earlier today. Because, to me, that's just hilarious.
Well, so that, in conclusion, the score was great. It was a great listen to, but overall it needed more variety, and it works. It works somewhat for the film. There could have been some changes up to it. I mean, that's really, so we like it, but at the same time there could have been more, unfortunately. So that's going to do it for episode 7. Now, our next episode is Hard Rain by Christopher Young. Now, I'm very excited about this one.
I have never seen the movie.
Oh, the score is wonderful.
I have never heard the score because I have never seen the movie.
The film's not bad. It's not a bad film. The score is fantastic, but there's a very special reason why I like the score, and we'll talk about it on the next episode. As always, you can find us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can send us an email, measuringthescore@gmail.com. Facebook, just type in Measuring the Score Podcast. We're on Podbean, Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, pretty much everywhere you can think.
YouTube.
Yes, we are now on YouTube as well. Just type in Measuring the Score Podcast or type in Chris Lott or Leslie Lott. Behind it, you're going to find us on there.
For our closed caption friends.
Yes, we do have some. So, seriously, if you guys want to reach out to us, you can find us on social media. Give us some, ideas. Give us some scores that you think would be great for us to cover because, we love getting them. Now, we do have some submissions already for season 2, which is going to be great. I'm very excited about some of these.
I am as well.
So, for Measuring the Score, as always, thank you so much for listening. I'm Chris Lott.
And I'm Leslie Lott.
Have a good one. Hey everyone, before we close this episode completely out, I want to give a big shout out to Dan and Manny over at the Nostalgia Test podcast. They're starting off their Rocky series with Rocky 1 all the way to Rocky Balboa. What's great about that is they asked us to come along for the ride. That's right, we get to start off the Rocky series with Rocky 1, talking about the score, the movie, the trivia, pretty much everything else. It was a lot of fun. Dan and Manny are great guys. They have a lot of great content I'm sure you're going to love. That episode is supposed to be releasing Tuesday, May 11th, which is the day after this episode releases. So after you listen to this, tomorrow go check out the Nostalgia Test podcast. you can go to their website, thenostalgiatest.com. They have a newsletter there. Yeah, a newsletter. We don't even have a newsletter, but they have a newsletter. So make sure you sign up. Go to Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, which is where I talk to them at. And when you get there, tell them that we sent you. So as always, for Measuring the Score, I'm Chris. Have a good one.